Welcome to another deep dive. We're going on a fascinating journey into the world of Spiritism today, through the life and work of Jean-Baptiste Roustaing.
A fascinating and complicated figure.
Yeah, I think most of our listeners already know that Spiritism is all about the idea that spirits of the dead can communicate with the living.
Right.
But where Roustaing fits into all of this, well, it's a bit of a puzzle.
Yeah. It is a puzzle, and
Yeah.
one I think we can solve together using the sources you brought today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Roustaing, now this is the interesting part, was a successful lawyer,
Very successful.
led the bar in Bordeaux,
Yeah.
but later in life, get this, claimed a special calling from the spirits of Moses and the evangelists to guide a new phase of Spiritist revelation.
It's an amazing story, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's so admired by some spiritists,
Right.
but then considered a dissident by others.
Oh, yeah.
The sources you've provided give us a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I think we should start with his early life, because it sounds like he had, from what I read, some serious challenges growing up.
Absolutely right. Roustaing had a really difficult upbringing, had to work his way through law school.
Wow.
So it really speaks to his determination that he not only finished, but went on to become so successful.
Yeah. I mean, that's really impressive.
Yeah.
And it makes his later shift towards Spiritism even more intriguing. What led him down that path?
Well, like a lot of people, he started as a skeptic.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't just going to accept the idea of spirit communication at face value.
Okay.
He really needed something more.
So how do you go from skeptic to spiritist? What changed his mind?
Well, he was very methodical in his approach.
Okay.
He dug deep into Kardec's work,
Yeah.
studied history and philosophy,
Yeah.
tried to really understand where Spiritism came from.
Mm-hmm.
He even compared his pre-Spiritism understanding of the spirit world to someone who's only studied Paris on a map.
Oh, wow. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It really highlights how limited our understanding can be if we only rely on, like, secondhand accounts. It's like, you got to get in there.
You got to experience it yourself.
Yeah.
And it's this search for evidence and deeper understanding that makes his later claims so compelling, whether you agree with them or not.
Okay, so let's get to the heart of it. Tell me about this revelation of the revelation. This is where things get really interesting from what I understand.
It is. So Roustaing became convinced that he was chosen for this special mission to guide a new phase of Spiritist revelation.
Okay.
So he partners with a medium named Emily Collignon
Okay.
to receive these messages through psychography, basically automatic spirit writing.
Oh, wow. Automatic spirit writing.
Yeah.
And this led to his book, Asa Quattro Evangelos, the Four Gospels, right? What were some of the key ideas in that book?
Well, one of the most controversial was his concept of the fluidic body of Jesus.
The fluidic body.
He proposed that Jesus didn't have a physical body as we understand it,
Okay.
but a body made of this more ethereal substance.
So hold on. A fluidic body. How do you explain that? What does that even mean?
Well, Roustaing used this concept to explain how Jesus could perform miracles.
Uh-huh.
He argued that a fluidic body wouldn't be bound by the same limitations as a physical one.
Okay.
But this idea, it really didn't sit well with everyone, especially Allan Kardec, the founder of Spiritism.
So Kardec, like the leading authority on Spiritism, disagreed with this core idea of Roustaing's.
He did.
Wow. That's got to be a tough position to be in.
It definitely created some tension.
Yeah.
Kardec called the fluidic body theory, at least hypothetical,
Yeah.
and suggested that it might not be on solid ground.
Okay.
And this difference of opinion is really at the heart of the controversy surrounding Roustaing.
And what's fascinating to me is that from what I read, they never actually met, like face to face, despite being major figures in the same movement.
Yeah, there's no record of them ever meeting.
Wow.
Even though Kardec visited Bordeaux where Roustaing lived,
Yeah.
Roustaing couldn't make it to the meetings
Oh.
because his wife was ill.
You've got to wonder what that meeting would have been like.
I know.
Two brilliant minds grappling with such a profound subject. But even without like a direct encounter, their ideas were clearly in conversation with one another.
Absolutely. And that conversation gets even more interesting when you look at Kardec's later writings.
You mean how he went on to like directly refute the fluidic body theory in his book, The Genesis?
Exactly.
Wow.
He presents this really powerful argument against the idea, saying that if Jesus didn't have a physical body, his experiences wouldn't be relatable to us.
Okay.
It would diminish the significance of his suffering, of his sacrifice.
So Kardec is saying that a fluidic body would make Jesus less human,
Yeah.
less real,
Less real.
and ultimately less meaningful as a role model for us.
Yes,
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement.
it is.
This disagreement between them really highlights the core tension we're exploring here.
Yeah.
This clash between two interpretations of Spiritism.
Absolutely.
Now, we've talked about like the pushback that Roustaing's ideas received, but what about his legacy? Like what happened after all of this?
You might be surprised to learn that while Roustaing's work was largely ignored in Europe after his death, it gained some surprising traction in a completely different part of the world.
Wait, are we about to take an unexpected trip to South America?
That's right, we're heading to Brazil.
Brazil.
It might seem like a random connection,
Yeah.
but Roustaing's ideas resonated really deeply there.
Really?
And they actually became intertwined with the development of Spiritism in Brazil.
Wow.
It's a great example of how ideas can travel across cultures
Right.
and take on new meanings in different contexts.
So Brazil, that's fascinating. What was it about Brazilian culture that made Roustaing's message so appealing?
Well, for starters, Brazil has a long history of spiritual traditions,
Yeah.
blending indigenous beliefs with elements of Catholicism and African religions.
Oh, okay.
So the idea of a spirit world and communicating with the dead, this wasn't something new or strange.
Right.
It was already familiar and accepted.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like fertile ground for Spiritism to take root.
Exactly. And when Spiritism did arrive in Brazil, it was often presented as this scientific approach to spirituality.
Okay, interesting.
It appealed to both the mystical and the rational sides of Brazilian culture.
So it wasn't just about blind faith. It offered a way to explore these spiritual ideas through reason and observation.
You got it. And remember, Roustaing himself was a man of science and logic,
Yeah.
a lawyer by profession,
Right.
but he also claimed to be receiving messages from the spirit world.
Yeah.
It's this combination of reason and revelation that seems to have resonated with Brazilians.
It's like he embodies both sides of the coin, the scientific and the spiritual.
Exactly.
But, I mean, was it just cultural openness? What else might have contributed to his popularity in Brazil?
Well, the historical context is really important here.
Okay.
Spiritism arrived in Brazil during a period of major social and political change.
Mm-hmm.
The country was modernizing rapidly, and traditional power structures were being challenged.
So it was a time of upheaval and uncertainty.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
People were searching for new ways to understand themselves
Yeah.
and their place in society.
And a sense of hope, maybe?
Absolutely. And Spiritism, with its emphasis on personal growth reincarnation and the interconnectedness of all souls.
Right.
It offered a framework for making sense of those chaotic times.
Okay.
It provided a sense of purpose, a belief in progress, both individually and as a society.
I can see how that message would be really powerful, especially for those who felt marginalized or left behind by those societal shifts.
Absolutely. And this is where Roustaing's work, with its focus on moral responsibility and the impact of our actions, likely resonated most deeply.
Okay.
He suggested that our choices have consequences not just in this life,
Right.
but across multiple lifetimes.
Wow.
It's a powerful idea that connects our individual actions to a larger cosmic purpose.
Okay, so we've got this unique cultural and historical context in Brazil that made Roustaing's ideas particularly appealing. But let's get back to the content of his work for a minute.
Sure.
We talked about the controversial fluidic body concept.
Right.
But what else stood out in his book, The Four Gospels?
Well, one thing that really jumps out is his emphasis on moral responsibility.
Okay.
He really explores the relationship between our actions in this life and their consequences in the afterlife.
So it's not just about talking to spirits, it's about understanding how our choices shape our spiritual journey over multiple lifetimes.
Exactly. And this focus on moral responsibility resonated deeply with many Brazilian spiritists.
Okay.
It gave them a framework for understanding the challenges and opportunities we face in this life within a larger cosmic context.
I see.
It's about personal growth, but it's also about how our individual choices contribute to the overall progress of humanity.
It's like a spiritual call to action.
Yes,
You're not just passively living your life, you're actively shaping your soul and contributing to a larger evolutionary process.
you put it perfectly. And it's this emphasis on the practical implications of Spiritism, on living a life aligned with these moral principles, that seems to have made it so attractive in Brazil.
Okay, so we're seeing this theme of action and responsibility emerge.
Yeah,
But of course, Roustaing's work wasn't without its critics, even in Brazil.
of course not.
So let's talk about those critiques. What were some of the main concerns raised about Roustaing's interpretation of Spiritism?
One of the criticisms, even from those who appreciated Roustaing's work, was that he delved into some pretty complex and esoteric concepts.
Okay.
He discussed different levels of the spirit world,
Mm-hmm.
various types of spirits, even multiple planets inhabited by souls at different stages of evolution.
Wow.
Some felt this was getting a bit too speculative, straying too far from the more empirical foundation that Kardec established.
It's like that age-old tension between wanting concrete evidence and wanting to explore the vast, mysterious realms of the spiritual.
Exactly, and some critics also pointed out that Roustaing relied heavily on one medium, Emily Collignon. They argued that without corroboration from other mediums and sources, his claims might be influenced by her individual perspective or
Right.
even by his own interpretations of the messages.
Yeah.
Remember, Kardec emphasized the importance of a universal consensus,
Huh.
of multiple spirits confirming the same teachings through different mediums.
So the question becomes, how much of Roustaing's work is based on verifiable spiritual truths,
Right.
and how much might be colored by human interpretation, even unintentionally?
It's a tricky balance, isn't it?
It is, and this concern about potential subjectivity is a big part of why the debate over Roustaing's place within Spiritism continued for so long.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that these disagreements don't necessarily mean Spiritism is flawed, or that one side is right and the other is wrong.
Right.
It simply reflects the challenges of interpreting complex spiritual concepts and the different ways individuals approach these big questions.
Exactly.
So how did this debate actually play out in Brazil? It sounds like there were some pretty strong opinions on both sides.
You're absolutely right. It wasn't just a polite academic discussion.
Right.
These were passionate disagreements about core beliefs.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned earlier, it even led to a legal battle.
Wait, a legal battle over spiritual teachings? That sounds intense.
It was, remember how we discussed Roustaing's work being included in the statutes of the FEB?
Yeah, the largest spiritist organization in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was a pretty big deal.
It was.
It seemed to signal that his ideas were considered foundational to the movement in Brazil.
Exactly. And this inclusion fueled the debate for decades.
Wow.
Think of it as a fault line running through the movement,
Okay.
separating those who embraced Roustaing's interpretations from those who felt he had strayed too far from Kardec's original vision.
Yeah.
It all came to a head in 2003 when there was a legal battle over whether to remove Roustaing's work from those FEB statutes.
Wow, so they took their doctrinal disputes to court.
They did.
What happened?
It was a pivotal moment, and it highlighted just how deeply divided the Brazilian Spiritist community was over Roustaing's legacy.
Yeah.
In a surprising turn of events, his work was ultimately removed from the FEB statutes in 2019.
Wow.
It marked a return to Kardec as the sole foundation of Spiritism for this major organization, seemingly closing a chapter on a long and contentious debate.
So after all that back and forth, it seems like the pendulum swung back towards Kardec.
It seems that way.
But what about Roustaing's legacy beyond the FEB?
Yeah.
Did his ideas continue to have an impact?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore further when we return for part 3 of our deep dive.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From Roustaing's early life to the heart of the controversy his teaching sparked.
Yes.
But before we wrap up this part of our exploration, what's one question you'd like to leave our listener with? Something to ponder as we head into the final part of our deep dive.
I would ask our listeners this. What do you think about the idea that even though Roustaing's work is no longer part of the FEB's official doctrine, it still has a place within the larger conversation about Spiritism?
Welcome back to our deep dive exploring the world of Jean-Baptiste Roustaing.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have, from his early life to those controversial teachings to that legal battle in Brazil.
Yeah.
And you left us with a really interesting question at the end of part 2.
I did.
Even though Roustaing's work was removed from the FEB statutes, did his ideas still have an impact? Did they continue to resonate within the Spiritist movement?
It's a great question. And I think the answer is more complicated than a simple yes or no.
Oh, okay.
So while the FEB's decision was significant, it didn't erase Roustaing's influence entirely.
Right.
His work is still being studied and debated by Spiritists all over the world.
Okay.
It's like his ideas, they planted these seeds that, while maybe not officially recognized by the largest organization, still managed to blossom in different ways.
So even though his work isn't part of the AVB's official doctrine anymore, it still has a place within the larger conversation about Spiritism.
Exactly. Think of it as adding another layer of complexity
Okay.
to an already nuanced movement.
That's interesting.
Some Spiritists view Roustaing as a visionary,
Okay.
someone who expanded upon Kardec's teachings, offered a more profound understanding of the spirit world.
So they see value in his exploration of those more esoteric concepts we talked about.
They do, even if they don't necessarily agree with all of his conclusions.
So they appreciate his willingness to kind of push the boundaries, explore those big questions about the nature of reality.
Exactly. Even if it leads to these unconventional or controversial ideas.
And for them, the removal of his work from the FEB statutes, it doesn't invalidate those insights, right?
Right. It simply means that there's room for multiple perspectives within Spiritism. It's a movement that encourages individual exploration and understanding.
It speaks to the dynamic nature of Spiritism, doesn't it? That it's not just this rigid, fixed doctrine.
Right.
It's a living, evolving system of thought.
I agree. And for others, Roustaing's work serves as a cautionary tale,
Okay.
a reminder of the importance of critical thinking
Right.
and careful discernment.
When engaging with spiritual teaching.
Exactly. They emphasize the need to ground our understanding in evidence, seek confirmation from multiple sources,
Okay.
be wary of interpretations that might be overly influenced by individual perspectives.
It highlights that tension we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
this balance between embracing those grand, sweeping spiritual concepts while also grounding our understanding in reason and evidence. It's like navigating between those two poles,
Yeah.
the mystical and the rational.
Exactly. And I think the key takeaway here is that there's no single right way to approach Roustaing's work or Spiritism as a whole.
Yeah.
It's about personal exploration, critical engagement, and ultimately forming your own understanding.
Based on your own experiences and insights.
Exactly.
It's about trusting your own inner compass as you navigate those complex spiritual waters.
Precisely. And remembering that even within a movement that values unity and harmony, there will always be room for thoughtful disagreement,
Yeah.
diverse interpretations.
Right.
It's this ongoing dialogue, this willingness to question and explore that keeps Spiritism vibrant
Relevant.
and relevant.
So what would you say are the most important lessons we can take away from Roustaing's story, particularly for someone who's just starting to explore Spiritism?
I think the first lesson is to approach Spiritism, or any spiritual path for that matter, with an open mind and a healthy dose of curiosity. Be willing to explore those different perspectives,
Yeah.
even the ones that challenge your initial assumptions.
It's about embracing that spirit of inquiry, that desire to delve deeper, uncover the layers of meaning.
Exactly. And the second lesson is to remember that you're not alone on this journey. There's a rich and diverse community of spiritists out there, each with their own unique understanding and experiences. So engage in dialogue, share your insights, and learn from others.
It's about recognizing that this is a collective journey, a shared exploration of those big questions that have captivated humanity for centuries.
You've summed it up perfectly, and I think Jean-Baptiste Roustaing, despite the controversy he sparked, ultimately contributed to that ongoing dialogue,
Yeah.
pushing us to think more deeply about the nature of reality, the meaning of life, and our place within this vast and mysterious universe.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of Jean-Baptiste Roustaing.
It's been a pleasure.
We've explored his life, his work, and the enduring legacy of his ideas. But remember, there's always more to discover. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.